Hello and welcome back, future scientists. My name is Mr. K. I'm here with Mississippi Public Broadcasting, and I've got another great biology ready for y'all today. So what are we talking about? Well, we're mostly going to be comparing plant and animal cells. Now, these are both eukaryotic cells, so they have a lot in common, but there's a few key differences that we have to remember so that we can ace this test. So let's go ahead and hop into it and start comparing these two types of cells. Okay. So first of all, remember that these are both eukaryotic cells, so they have a lot of things in common. Okay, both plant and animal cells are going to have a cell membrane that encloses the cell. Now, something I need you to remember about the cell membrane, its job is that it lets things into the cell, but only certain things. And we call that being selectively permeable. It selects what it wants to come into and out of the cell. Okay? Both plant and animal cells are filled with cytoplasm. Let's remember that that prefix cyto, C-Y-T-O, means cell. So anytime you see something with the word cyto in it, it's talking about a cell. What is cytoplasm? Well, it's a jelly-like substance that fills the cell up. We don't really want the cell to deflate like a balloon with all the air out of it, so it's filled up with this substance, and it keeps the cell nice and filled up, but it's also how it has certain chemicals in it that the cell needs, okay? Another similarity in between plant and animal cells is they both have a nucleus, and remember the nucleus is where the DNA is stored, okay? They both have a nucleus, so they're both eukaryotic cells. That's what it means to be eukaryotic, is that you have a true nucleus. The nucleus is really important. That's where we keep the DNA. DNA is like the instructions for the cell to follow, and we keep the DNA inside of the nucleus to keep it safe. Okay? Another similarity in between plant and animal cells is that they both have ribosomes. Remember, ribosomes are the protein builders of the cell. Your body is mostly made up of protein, so proteins are very important for our bodies. Proteins are very important for the cell as well, and so they need a way to make those proteins, and ribosomes are the things that are going to make them. Let's look at some more similarities between plant and animal cells. So let's take a look at this picture. On the left we have animal cells, and on the right we have plant cells. There's a few key differences I want to point out. First of all, take a general look at the shape of these cells. On the right you'll see that plant cells are very geometric. A lot of the times they'll have a very square or rectangular look to them, and that's because the cell wall kind of holds it in that shape. On the left, the animal cell, that's just a general animal cell, but not every single cell in your body looks like that. Because our bodies do so many different things, we're moving around, we're thinking, these cells sometimes are very specialized inside of an animal cell. So we're just representing it like this today so that we can learn some of the organelles, but most of your cells have all kinds of crazy shapes to them, okay? But plant cells will almost always be that square or rectangular shape. Okay, so I've talked about the shape of them. You'll notice that the plant cell has a cell wall where the animal cell does not. There's a few other key differences we'll talk about. Inside of the plant cell, there's the large central vacuole. Remember, that's where all the water is for the plant. Plants need a lot of water, so they need a place to store all of it. Another big difference in between plant and animal cells is their size. Plant cells tend to be a little bit bigger than animal cells. Okay, so this is just an overview of some of the key differences, but I wanted to hop in and get into some of the nitty-gritty on the similarities and differences between these cells. Okay, here are some more similarities between plant and animal cells. Okay, they both have a mitochondria, and remember, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. This is where the energy is coming from. Okay. Now, animal cells use them a little bit more than plant cells because plant cells have those chloroplasts, which kind of helps them make their own food, but they both have mitochondria and they both use them to make energy, okay? Both plant and animal cells also have a vacuole. Remember, vacuoles are like the warehouse of the cell. It's where we keep stuff until we're ready to use them. So this could be water or food or sometimes even waste products. Now, plant cells have a very large central vacuole. They need a lot of water. That water has to be stored somewhere. So they have a big warehouse right in the middle where all the water goes. For our cells, we have these vacuoles, but they're not quite as big. Instead of one big one, we'll have a lot of little small ones. So when you're trying to look at cells and tell the difference in between them, If you see that large central vacuole in the middle of a cell, you're looking at a plant cell. Animal cells have small ones instead. Okay? So let's take another look at these. Let's try to think of some differences in between these cells. Well, we already talked about how plant cells tend to be very geometric. So you can see this one has those crisp, sharp lines. A lot of times they're being depicted as square or rectangle. This is kind of a different shape. Whereas animal cells can really look like anything. They can look circular like this. I wouldn't say that's the most common type. But again, this is just a general representation of an animal cell. They kind of have a lot of different looks to them because our bodies are so complex. Okay, I do see inside of the plant cell, you see that big blue blob kind of down there in the middle that kind of looks like a swimming pool a little bit. What would that be called? Well, that's the central vacuole, right? Okay, another difference in between these two pictures is we talked about the shape already, but look at the plant cell. It kind of has a thicker outline than the animal cell, right? The animal cell just has that little blue line on the outside. Plant cells have a cell wall, and that's what that big, thick green line is representing here in this picture. So we've talked about some of the similarities in between plant and animal cells. Right now, we're going to start hopping into some of the differences. Again, they're both eukaryotic cells, so they have a lot in common. But let's try to focus on how they're different from one another, and that'll be what we want to try to remember. Okay? Before we get into that, though, here are just a few more similarities. So they both have an endoplasmic reticulum. Let's remember that the endoplasmic reticulum is the transporter of the cell, right? Sometimes we abbreviate the endoplasmic reticulum as ER, and it's the transporter. It's how we move stuff around your cells, okay? They both also have a Golgi apparatus. What does a Golgi apparatus do? Well, I see that it distributes proteins. The words I gave you last time, these are the ones that we want to focus on, is that the Golgi apparatus processes and packages proteins. It's almost more of like the mail center, right, of the cell. It kind of packages everything up and sends it where it's supposed to go. So if you ever get a question about packaging and processing proteins, it's the Golgi apparatus. Apparatus has 2P, so that might be a good way to remember it. All right, so now we're finally ready to start talking about how they're different from one another. To me, just remembering how they're different is a lot easier than remembering all the ways that they're alike. They are very similar cells because they're both eukaryotic. So let's focus on remembering the key differences in between them, and then that'll help us remember how they're alike from one another. So the first thing here is that plant cells have a cell wall. Animal cells do not have a cell wall. Our cells can look like anything. Some of them look like stars. Some of them are really, really long. You've got a nerve cell that runs from your brain down to your leg. So it's very, very long. Well, a cell wall is not going to be good in that scenario because it's not going to let the cell change shape as you grow older and get taller. Okay? So animal cells do not have a cell wall. Another difference in between these two, a few large animal cells might have more than one nucleus. I mentioned last time your muscle cells will have multiple nuclei and multiple mitochondria, but plant cells always just have one. Another difference in between plant and animal cells is that plant cells have chloroplasts, and chloroplasts are used for photosynthesis. If you break that word down, photosynthesis, photo means light and synthesis means to make. So what's going on here is that plants don't have to eat anything because they make their own food using light from the sun and water from the ground. So plant cells have chloroplasts and animal cells do not. Okay, I have a couple more key differences in between these two cells for y'all. Okay, so another difference in between these two types of cells is that animal cells have mitochondria, and that's what we're using to make energy. Okay. Plant cells primarily use chloroplasts to make energy, but they do have mitochondria in there as well. Okay? We mentioned earlier how plant cells have one large vacuole, while animal cells have many small vacuoles. So that's another key difference. If you see a big vacuole, you're looking at a plant. Okay? Animal cells have an organelle that plant cells do not. They're called lysosomes. Remember, lysosomes are like the garbage disposal of the cell. It's how we clean your cell up. Well, plant cells don't really need them, so they don't have them. But animal cells do have lysosomes, while plant cells do not. Okay? So the last thing I wanted to work on today, teacher, if you could, feel free to pause the video and go ahead and pass out this Venn diagram to all of your students. I talked about how these two cells are different from one another, and I want to see what y'all can come up with. And then here in just a moment, I'll get them on the board and we can kind of review them together. Now, I'll give you a hint that most of them are going to go in the middle. Okay, remember, these are both eukaryotic cells, so they're more alike than they are different. Plant cells should have 5 underneath it, and animal cells should have 5 underneath it. Everything else is going in the middle. So pass those out, pause the video, take 5, 10 minutes, however long you need, and then when you're ready, you can unpause the video, and I'm going to go over it with your class, and then that way we're all on the same page. All right. Great, y'all, welcome back. Thanks so much. I know y'all probably don't even need my help on this, but just in case you do, I'm going to get them on the board. Make sure y'all are changing or marking up anything that I have up here, okay? Now, I can't write quite small enough to get all of these terms on here at once, so I'll do about half of them, and then I'll erase them, and then I'll do the other half. So just before I erase them, make sure you've got everything you need, or you can always just back the video up a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, the first one here in top left corner says eukaryotic. Which of these cells are eukaryotic? They are both eukaryotic. So we'll go ahead and put that one in the middle. Okay? See, I just can't write small enough to get everything in here, but it's probably easier on your paper. All right, the next one is the plasma membrane. The plasma membrane is kind of like another word for the cell membrane, and both of these cells have a cell membrane. The plasma membrane controls what comes into and what goes out of the cell. The next one is mitochondrion or mitochondria. Well, both of these cells have mitochondria, so we're going to put that one in the middle too. Remember, this is the powerhouse of the cell, and although plant cells use chloroplast for that a little bit, they do have mitochondria, and they do use them to make energy. All right, can have cilia or flagella. Because the plant cells have a cell wall, they cannot have cilia or flagella. They are what are on outside of the cell, and so the cell wall kind of prohibits that from happening. So only animal cells are going to have cilia and a flagella. And if you don't remember, these are basically how cells move around. On your picture on this cell, these little hair-like structures are called cilia, and then sometimes you'll see it'll almost look like a tail or a whip. That's called a flagella, but they're kind of used for the same thing. They're both used to move around. Okay, let's do the next one, the large vacuole. Now, this is one that we talked about earlier. Does anyone remember where this should go? Well, I see almost this swimming pool looking thing in the plant cell, and that is actually water. So we're going to go ahead and put large vacuole over here under plant cells. That's a dead giveaway that you're looking at a plant cell. Okay? So the next one is small or no vacuole. Well, if the plant cell has the large one, the animal cells have the small one. So we'll put small vacuole. Great. Okay, the next one is chloroplast. Now, that does belong in either the left or the right. Does anyone remember which one that one goes to? Chloroplasts are only in plant cells, so let's put that over here. Does anyone remember what chloroplasts are used for? That's right, they're used to make glucose or food for the plant. Okay, the next one is the cell wall. Where's cell wall gonna go? I can hear some of y'all saying plant cells, and you're right. Cell wall. You see how this cell looks very geometric? That's because the cell wall kind of dictates its shape. Okay? Animal cells don't have that, so we can take on a variety of different shapes for our cells. Okay? The next one is endoplasmic reticulum. That's an organelle. That's an organelle that both of these cells share, so we're going to put it here in the middle. Okay? Let's just abbreviate that as ER. Y'all don't want to see me write that whole word. Okay, let's do these two more. These are dealing with the sizes, and then I'll erase it and we'll knock the rest of them out. Okay, so the first one is saying 10 to 30 micrometers. Okay, well, remember that animal cells tend to be a little bit smaller. So this one's going to go over here, 10 to 30 Okay, and then the next one is 10 to 100. Plant cells can be a little bit bigger, And so we'll put that over here. The important thing to remember here is that the plant cells can just be a little bit larger, okay? All right, great. Take a second, pause the video, make sure everybody's got what they need. I'm going to erase these, and then we'll do the second half here in just a minute, okay? All right, just got a couple more. Thanks for hanging in there with me, everybody. All right, the next one is the Golgi apparatus. Okay, where is that going to go? The Golgi apparatus goes in the middle. They both have a Golgi apparatus. Okay? Does anyone remember what the Golgi apparatus does? A lot of P words, right? Packages, processes, proteins. Okay, the next one is a nucleus. Well, this one's very important. This is a nucleus. This is a nucleus. They both have them, okay? I've said it a couple times already. Plant and animal cells are both eukaryotic cells. Something very important about eukaryotic cells is that they have a nucleus, so they both have one. Okay, the next one is cytoplasm. Where's that one going to go? Cytoplasm goes in the middle. Does anyone remember what cyto means? Cyto means cell. Okay, the next one is ribosomes. Which one of these has ribosomes? That one goes in the middle too. Okay, they make proteins. The next one is centrioles. Where are centrioles going to go? That's another one that goes in the middle. Centrioles. What do centrioles do? I just barely mentioned these last lesson. Centrioles are responsible for helping the cell divide the correct way. Okay? The next one is cytoskeleton. That one also goes in the middle. So I hope y'all are seeing, I know for me, my stuff in the middle is getting filled up, but these cells have more in common than they have, they're more similar than they are different. And that's why we're talking about both of them at once. But when it comes to remembering all of this stuff, just focus on how they're different from one another. That's a lot less to remember. There's a lot of similarities, but there's only a couple ways they're different. So that's what you want to try to remember. Okay, so we did cytoskeleton. Let's come up here to has DNA. Where is that one going to go? Has DNA is in the middle. They both have a nucleus, and inside of that nucleus is the DNA, okay? The next one is cell wall, no cell wall. Where does that go? We have cell wall on the plant cell, so no cell wall goes over here. No cell wall. That helps our cells, animal cells, take on all the different shapes it needs in order to make your body work the way it's supposed to. Okay, so we have a fixed shape. The fixed shape is going to go under plant cells. Once that cell wall is established, it can't really change the shape of the cell at all. So that's why they always look so geometric, like a square or a rectangle or an octagon. Once that cell wall is established, the cell doesn't change shape anymore. Okay? So then the next one is the shape can change. Well, that's the animal cell. Great. Just a couple more, y'all. Thanks for hanging in there with me. This last one says, makes more cells through mitosis and meiosis. This one's going to go in the middle. We haven't really talked about mitosis and meiosis, but that's just basically how cells replicate. So when plant cells need to make more plant cells, they do these processes. When animal cells need to make more animal cells, they do these processes. So I'm just going to kind of squeeze mitosis and meiosis up here at the top. And those go in the middle. So I put mitosis and meiosis kind of right there in the middle at the top. I couldn't really fit it in there at the bottom. So y'all, these are ways that animal and plant cells are similar, but it's also showing some key differences on how they're different from one another. That's what we really want to focus on, okay? Y'all, thank you so much for following along. We're going to learn so much together this year. Your teacher has some more assignments for you to practice this stuff on, so make sure to give it your best effort, and I hope you have a great day.